Hi everyone, Dan Gunner from Insane Forensics. Welcome back to Tech Talk Tuesday, where every week we try to give something to help your threat hunting and security program. And today what we're going to do is start a series of past events and critical infrastructure attacks. And today we're going to start with a historical one that dates back now to almost 9 years, over 9 years ago, which was the critical infrastructure attack on Ukraine in 2015. We'll talk about what happened in this attack, and then we'll dive into the detection engineering piece, which is a piece that often isn't talked about when you talk about these historical events. So this video should help both with an overview of what happened, as well as ways to detect it. Because what we often see as we go into places is that people know about events, but they often actually can't detect or respond to them still. And so we'll dive more into that today. So, what happened during this attack? So, this was back in December 23rd, 2015. What's known from this and some high overarching fact, BlackEnergy 3 malware was used to compromise at least three energy distribution companies. Now, energy wasn't the only sector targeted at this time. Ukrainian rail was attacked. We know, we've heard of financial and other areas attacked. BlackEnergy is kind of a wide use malware kit. We'll talk about it actually here in a slide or two. But basically, BlackEnergy was used to target, among many of the targets, critical infrastructure as one. And they were able to get into three energy distribution companies, right? So, distribution companies and power, right? There's generation, transmission, and distribution. Distribution is what gets power actually to businesses and houses and residential areas. This happened in a regional, or multiple regional and central facilities within a 30-minute window. What's interesting on this is the attackers actually manually moved the mouse around. There's actually a video out there you can find of one of the engineers that recorded the mouse moving without someone touching it. They access these facilities within a 30-minute window at multiple sites. So again, very well coordinated, very well resourced attacker on this. They took down about 30 substations, power for about 230,000 people. It's believed they used stolen credentials, and then they used kill disk to erase files from target systems and corrupted the master boot record, again, delaying response and doing other things with this. So we talked about BlackEnergy. What is BlackEnergy? So there's three versions of BlackEnergy, and there's some debate in the security industry that BlackEnergy 1 was actually released on malware forums. It was just a simple bot builder toolkit. It had distributed denial of service features. Really didn't have exploits. It relied on other exploits, and it was used for email and phishing campaigns. This came out on malware forums, was kind of one of those community written malware forum projects. This emerged in 2007. When you get later on, though, and you get into BlackEnergy 2 and 3, you start to see nation state features added. So in BlackEnergy 2, it was an extension. It used some of the code that was present in BlackEnergy 1, but it added more sophisticated process injection. It added more of a rootkit approach. It actually made it modular. It added encryption, added more evasion. It included more of a plugin architecture. So it's a little closer to a nation state malware toolkit. BlackEnergy 3 emerged in 2014, so around the year before this event. Greatly simplified malware code, a lot of good software engineering, if you will, on the attack side. It changed how it distributes, so it actually distributes as a DLL. It's easier to use, both manually and in automated toolkits. And this was the version that was used in the Ukraine 2015 attacks. What's interesting, if we look here on the left side of this slide, you'll actually see some of the modules that BlackEnergy 3 added into there, right? So they had file systems, they had keystroke logging, they had, even TeamViewer, remote desktop features, listing stuff. So, this toolkit with the modules is able to do that full command and control and even get down into some of the effects, and password stealing's also in there. And so again, when you look at BlackEnergy 3 and 2 versus 1, BlackEnergy 1 really just had DDoS file transfer and very limited malware C2 capabilities. So again, malware, very long running kit, or BlackEnergy, very long running malware kit. And really there's different versions believed to be written by different authors, likely 2 and 3 were a little more nation state-esque, where one was more of, community malware forum type project. So more details about what happened. So these details are actually according to Ukrainian government. This came off the website. So as you look at this event, what's interesting is there's a lot of security companies that have put out analysis. They put out theories and speculation. For today, we're actually going to use what comes from Ukraine's government site. Obviously, some would argue there might be bias. This is what the actual defender says. At the same time, this kind of is a core piece of information unreleased out there. It is, the lowest potential speculation source on getting to this, even if there might be some bias introduced in there. And so, according to the Ukraine Ministry of Energy and Environmental Protection, they believe that the spearphishing took place at least 6 months before. Spearphishing, social engineering, password collection. At this time, it's challenging when you look at this part of the world because these two countries have basically been going at it for a while. It's believed that Sandworm, the group that did this, is aligned to Russian interests, and according to the U.S. Department of Justice has actually sanctioned parts of Russian military and intel for this. So with this, it's believed that at least 6 months ahead, there was spearphishing, social engineering, getting that BlackEnergy and malware in place, getting passwords, getting that type of stuff. The messages that we're seeing from this had those BlackEnergy attachments, primarily in Word documents. They did use some of those CVEs for Microsoft Office at that time, and they were sent to public email addresses that were found on the internet for different Ukrainian sources, right? And so the attacker did do kind of that bulk collection of emails they know about, whether scraping from the internet or otherwise, and use those to kind of tailor these documents down. Some of these documents were pretty tailored, so it wasn't just generic spear phishing. There was actually very good theming going on here. Once the attackers gained access, they got network architecture, passwords, software installed, accounts, remote infrastructure, everything they needed to lead up to figuring out how to cause the impact. As we mentioned, when stuff actually happened, multiple attackers simultaneously got on the target network. At least one utility, maybe more, they came from Russian IP ranges. Again, with IPs, you can't really, that's not strong enough down to say it's a group. At the same time, groups do make mistakes and sometimes either don't use a VPN goes down, but in some cases, they came from there. In this case, in 2015, and this is different from the 2016 attacks, the attackers actually manually changed the breaker position. So they use the engineering software, they use the actual industrial software on site. Again, some of the engineers have video or cell phone camera shots of them actually changing the breaker in the software. But again, like there's some interesting stuff there. They knew how to use the software. They likely had some of the architecture and other things to know, hey, these breakers are key. Hey, do this here, right? Um, at the same time, there were IT infrastructure elements that failed. So some of the uninterrupted power supply switches, other things out there. There was a big denial of service of phone infrastructure. This caused a little bit of chaos, I think, in the response and made it harder for some of the defenders to work through. They still worked through it. The outage, I think, was under 6 hours in a lot of cases. And in some cases, it was very short, even shorter than that. And it's interesting when you look at 2016 because these utilities actually got a lot more efficient at getting into manual mode and basically running their operations manually. And again, at the end of the day, today we're talking about the energy infrastructure, but energy wasn't the only part of critical infrastructure targeted. Rail was targeted. I think I've heard finance and others were targeted too, other parts. And so this was a widespread attack, but today we're talking about the energy side of this. So how do you detect this? What are detection points for this? Obviously, with spear phishing, with those types of attacks, Office document file analysis, looking at those embedded OLE objects, figuring out what they do. We've had some interesting approaches, both using things like ChatGPT to say, hey, let me take all of the Office documents out. Let me take these obfuscated, scripting objects out of documents and just see if I can get a quick response without a human having to go through. And we've actually gotten really good detection on doing automated detection of Office document malware. The lateral movement, this will be another one to where whether they're doing it living on the land style, using stolen accounts, or using other methods, the lateral movement detection points will be one that you'll want to stand out, right? And with this, the way to do that and the way to do it's going to be kind of to model or build an understanding of what traffic or what account usage looks like in your environment. And then try to build alerts that say, hey, something doesn't look right on how this has evolved out, right? And from those kind of deviations from the norm, from those anomalies, if you will, that might get you farther down to finding some of the lateral movement bits. Detection of BlackEnergy and kill disk. So there are YAR rules for some. You do have to watch with some of the static matching rules, but some of the YAR rules, some of the things like memory and process injection, some of the other areas. These kits are kits that evolved. They're adding more features as we see from even BlackEnergy 2 to 3. We saw more features that go in, but you'll want to detect both on network and on the host both the malware itself, but also the techniques within the malware that are used, right? Because you can refactor part of the malware. And if you're just going off hashes or you're just going off certain indicators, those might get thrown off, right? A key one here, detection of the remote admin, right? So in this case, again, attackers were moving mice around. There are cases where people are like, why is there team viewer? Some utilities do actually use team viewer as part of their operations, others don't. And so if, if team viewer, if other remote admin features are part of your operations, you definitely want to look at how those are used. And this isn't just to pick on TeamViewer, but TeamViewer is a good case in that their proprietary protocol, you can actually see the client IDs of who connects in. So if you're able to parse that protocol out, you can actually say, hey, I'm seeing a new client ID or I'm seeing a client ID connect to a box that I shouldn't see that, right? That's some of the things that, again, as you get down into the actual packet processing and look at this, there's opportunities to look for that. If you're in a case to where you're not using remote admin tools, then you can just say, hey, if I have any of these protocols, if I have any of these known admin service, PS exec, other things going in, we can say, hey, this is definitely something to look at. Command line analysis. So some of these commands were run through things like run DLL32 to execute, BlackEnergy 3 and other modules. And so doing command line analysis, pulling out some of that stuff that we've talked about in previous Tech Talk Tuesday from the Windows event logs. You want to look at those command lines and say, hey, it's weird that I'm loading this file out of the applications folder. You can do it in newness. You can do it and say, hey, this generally doesn't happen. I don't see the operational use for this on, this given purpose-driven system, right? So again, as you get into that TTP and you get into that MITRE attack technique, there's a whole MITRE attack technique for it. Again, we've talked about it in the past in Tech Talk Tuesdays, but that's one you can look for. Finally, valid account pattern analysis. This is a tricky one, right? But attackers, if they're super sophisticated, they might use accounts in the ways that those accounts are generally intended to be used and in the patterns. But it's likely that they're not either going to know that, they're going to make a mistake, or in this case, right, they're taking advantage of password reuse or having that valid account. So understanding where your accounts are, the trust boundaries they're crossing, the parts of the operation they're going into, this might help you build patterns for valid account analysis or hijacking of those. And so again, this was a quick overview just of the Ukraine 2015 incident, what happened, ways to detect it, different MITRE attack techniques and other things involved. Hopefully this was helpful. Again, this was the start of a series, so we'll cover another kind of common big event, and we'll keep moving through the big events over the next few weeks. Let us know if you want us to talk about anything else. If you have ideas, drop them below. I think we have a forum also where we're collecting ideas. And thanks for tuning in. We hope to see you back next week.